Hey there, Independent Scientologists! Discover a new perspective to your bridge by visiting ao-gp.org. Get in session with remote auditing using the Theta Meter. Are you curious about where you stand? Head on over to ao-gp.org now and take our free personality test. Join the growing group of independent Scientologists today.
All right, welcome to another Scientology Outside of the Church podcast. This is season 7, episode 17. I am here with Michael Grady. Michael is a recent initiate to independent Scientology. You haven't done any services in the church, have you?
Not the actual church, just an independent doing the HQS.
Okay, great. So the HQS, for those of you listening that do not know, is the Hubbard Qualified Scientologist course. It is like a sampler platter of different auditing techniques, steady information, that sort of a thing, to get a person, get their feet wet on auditing and a bunch of other things. And you're about what, halfway through?
Pretty much, yeah, about halfway, yeah.
Okay.
Just finished the lower TRs.
Okay. So basically we're going to do a podcast on beginning questions and answers, a new user's guide to independent Scientology for people that run across the podcast, both on YouTube and Spotify, Apple podcasts, and things like that. So we'll just do it in sort of a Q&A format, and then the conversation will go from there, and however long it takes is however long we'll take. So what questions can I answer for you?
All right. Well, I'm really honored that you have me on here to ask questions. We've had some really great conversation the last couple of days with when I signed up for the sample session that you offer on your website.
Uh-huh.
And here we are a couple of days later, a few days later, actually going on a podcast asking a lot of the questions I have. It's such an intriguing topic, and there's so much information. Of course, there's a lot of questions that come with that, right?
Yeah, it's a very broad subject.
It really is. Yeah. I'm fortunate that I have a mentor that is encouraging me to go through this. And so I don't have any doubts about the subject. I'm just all for, okay, I have a very successful mentor. He says to do this. I said, okay, it works. So I'm going for it. Right. So I guess I'll just start at the top here. So you have an amazing platform you've created where everything's online. I don't know if there's anywhere else that's doing this, and I haven't really seen that, but it's usually all in person. And so one of the big questions I had initially with interacting with you and doing this online possibly is there's a conversation with you should be in person while you do these auditing because you want the theta in the room to overpower the PC's bank. What would you say about that?
Well, like Hubbard says, auditor plus PC is greater than the PC's bank. No auditing can occur without communication, and communication requires a stable channel to communicate over. If we can have a conversation in a podcast, we can have a conversation in an auditing session, whether it's book 1, Dianetics, the original Dianetics from 1950, or if we are using a Theta Meter over Zoom with me controlling that meter, via Zoom. Hang on here. My audio just dropped out.
Okay.
Testing. You got it? Okay. I can
hear
out. So it's one of those things that it works just as well. And we were talking about this the other day. The biggest concern that well, even myself back in 2009, 2010, before we started delivering remote auditing, was that auditing over the internet, well, what if the PC leaves the session? Well, that is a consideration. Has it ever happened to me in a couple thousand hours of auditing with a PC leaving the session? No. If you know what you're doing and you're good enough at what you're doing, that's not going to happen. Beyond that, we're all in the same room, and the intention that you get across in an auditing session as an auditor and the training that you've had, it works fine. It doesn't matter whether we're on opposite sides of the planet or we're in the same room. The gains are the same. The only The only caveat to that is that you have a decent internet connection, and anybody that's ever been doing anything with the internet and online gaming knows what latency is, that there's a little bit of a communication lag between what you say and when they hear it. And you have to be aware of that as an auditor auditing remotely with a Theta Meter over Zoom, to know that there's going to be a micro delay when you say, what's your favorite fruit? And you read off the fruits as an assessment to the person. There's going to be a little bit of a delay. And once you figure that out, you can ask some test questions to get a read on the meter. You go, okay, now I know what we're dealing with, and off to the races you go. Otherwise, it's exactly the same.
So maybe lower level Scientologists that are co-auditing each other in like the lower grades, maybe that would that be a concern?
Well, the only thing that you can't do via Zoom and using a Theta Meter is you can't do the objectives processes. You've got to be in the room with the person you're auditing, controlling the body, doing those objectives processes in the room. That's the only thing we cannot do. And we have solutions for that, unless you live in lower Pakistan or something like that, where we don't have any trained auditors. Then it might be a problem. Have we run into any problems? Typically, no. Most people live near somebody that we know that can do the objectives with them, or worst case scenario, we can have them do the HQS course free of charge if they're receiving auditing and they've gotten a package, for example, and they can do the HQS course, and they can twin up with somebody, a family member or a friend, and have those delivered in person as a co-audit, and then we can continue on with the normal auditing that we can do over the internet. But that's it. Anything else we can handle. There isn't any exception to that. We can deliver the lower grades. We can deliver newer Dynetics. We can deliver the OT levels, new OT5, the L's, everything. We've literally done it all with
Wow.
exceptional results, and success stories are on our website too.
Yep, saw that. Amazing. Okay, another question. In order to go clear, is it really necessary to go through the grades, or can you skip them?
Well, that is a great question. Now, back in the day, we used to have, and they still exist, and they're actually on the present day Scientology grades, the levels at the end. Back in the day, you used to have what is called the quads. And that, well, at that time it was the triples, because they're called quads because there's 4 flows and you're doing them, and it's a primary process. If it's grade 0, it's on communication. If it's grade 1, it's going to be on problems. Grade 2 is going to be overts and withholds. And that was all there was just the quads. And then LRH had a conversation with a CS, I forget who it was at the moment, and the CS said, look, we need to improve the gradient on this. What do you think, Ron? And he said, I agree. So they created a gradient approach on these expanded grades, that what you're doing is, in so doing the expanded grades, you're gradiently improving the person's awareness to the point to where they can front up to auditing new era Dynetics. I have a PC currently that is starting new era Dynetics, and she is on her 201st session after doing the expanded grades, basically 1 hour, hour and a half at a time, 3 days a week over the course of 2 years. And it has changed her life. Her success stories for those expanded grades are on the website. And it is, at one point in time, new era Dynetics was at the bottom of the bridge back in 1980-81. And LRH revised that bridge a couple of times, like the one I have on the wall behind me, to where he realized that it was a lot for people to front up to doing new era Dynetics, and expanded grades gradually get you to the point to where you can run new era Dynetics fully and completely and get the most bang for your buck out of it, as opposed to running shallow on it if you were to do new era Dynetics before you did the expanded grades. Now, that's not to say that you can't do some new era Dynetics in a repair program in the middle of the expanded grades or before. Some people can run it, some people can't. But anybody can run standard regular Dynetics without a meter, because the reason why Dianetics works per LRH, and he mentions this in 1960 on the State of Man Congresses, is because anybody can be a victim. What's happened to you? Well, I was in a car accident and I broke my leg. Anybody can do that. And interestingly enough, just as a side note, the entire grade chart from the bottom all the way up to OT8 is approached from the viewpoint of victim. It isn't until after OT8 that you start handling it from a different vantage point. So it's a gradient approach on that, and that's just the way that we do it. And it is definitely recommended to do the expanded grades, because you will not get the efficacy of the OT levels. You will not get nearly as many gains because you're not set up properly. That's why the bridge is a gradient approach to it. And believe you me, I've had people come to me and they say, yep, I've had all my grades and everything. I'm like, you sure? Because I'm looking at this OCA graph and I'm going, gosh, I'm not so sure about that. And they swear on a stack of Dianetics books and Bibles, yes, I have. And then and I don't have their folders. I can't get their folders because they're in the church. And so I have to take them at their word. And then they get on the OT levels. And sure enough, I have to pull them back down and do the expanded grades on them because they're falling on their head, as LRH puts it, because they can't run this stuff properly. Their awareness isn't there yet to do those particular levels. So you have to cut that gradient and go back to square one and clear those things up with the quads, at least, if not the entire expanded grades. TLDR, yes, the expanded grades are very important.
And what does TLDR mean?
Too long didn't read.
Okay.
I see that on Reddit a lot. So that's the short answer. Yeah, definitely you need to do that. Now, also, I must mention that grade 0 and grade 2 are the longest of the expanded grades, grade 0 especially. Now, that doesn't mean that a person cannot get the end phenomena of the expanded grades a halfway, 2/3, 3/4, and they don't have to do every process on there. When they have the end phenomena of that grade, they're done. You attest them and make sure everything's cool with it, and you move on to the next grade. So it varies some to widely depending on what your current state is, whether you have any PTS that's going on, your potential trouble source, how things are going, and just how you are naturally as a being from the get-go. And that can vary quite a bit. So it isn't necessarily everybody has to do every process, but everybody typically tends to finish somewhere between halfway to 3/4 through. Sometimes I'll give people the option, do you want to do the rest of these processes anyway, just to be sure? And some people are going, no, I'm good. Others will say, yeah, let's do it. And we'll go ahead and do it anyway. So the other thing that I should mention is that, let's say you're a past life clear. This does happen where people,
I know one. Yeah.
Okay. And people drop the body and then they come back into Scientology next time around, and we do some auditing and it occurs to them, or maybe they already know and they're originating it and you need to clean that up. At a minimum, what you would do is if in fact they are a past life clear and we have all that data and it's verified via the meter and they feel good about it, at a minimum, we'll go back and we'll do the quad processes, which is the one at the very end of each one of those grades, and handle that and rehabilitate whatever they did last life through that. And then we'll also give them the Joburg security check, which is the sort of plain white wrapper security check that we still use, modernized with some more questions on it because it came from the early 60s. A little of that is outdated. We've modernized it with more 21st century questions added onto it without deleting any of the old ones, just for the old guys. And once you're done with that, now you can move on to the solo 1 and 2 course and then progress. And we have had people that were on their OT levels last lifetime, and we can fix that and find out where they were at and rehabilitate whatever it was that they finished, or if something went wrong and let's say they died on it, which is what happened to me, you can then continue on once you get cleaned up, and off you go to continue up the grade chart on the OT levels from where you left off last lifetime.
Wow. So what happened to you?
Long story short, I was in the Mediterranean with LRH, and in 1967, he was still unaware on OT2 that the dates to the incidents were falsely implanted. They were wrong dated. What that means is, axiomatically in Scientology, to get a proper, and tell me if you don't understand this and we can explain it to the listeners as well, but I'm going to use the vernacular, auditor's vernacular otherwise, and we can explain it if need be. In order for something to as is, which means erase for lack of a better word, you have to have the proper time, place, form, and event. That's axiom 38. And if you don't date locate that properly, and this is what was done on the OT2 materials, is that those particular implants were implanted with wrong dates. So with getting a wrong date, they're still live. And so you're not seeing the fruition of the whole thing. He didn't know this at the time, and I was on a pilot of it and ended up dropping the body from it. I died in 1967 in the Mediterranean, and I picked up the current body known as Jonathan Burke, which is talking right now, and was born in East Africa, in Ethiopia. Now I live in South Africa. So
Yeah.
that's how that happened. And he later on figured out that these dates were wrongly put in there to throw a person off of the trail if somebody like him came along and tried to straighten this whole miasma of implants and for lack of a better word, GPMs in there. Now it's all straightened out, but that was after I died that happened. And then I picked up this body, and my dad got into Scientology when I was about 2.5 and became a class 4 auditor. And then I got into Scientology and joined staff in 1987.
And how old were you then?
18 when I got trained as an auditor at 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. So over 30
That's quite a
years
history.
ago. Yeah. So, it was a research line, and I don't have any regrets on it or anything like that. I used to follow LRH around. I was a trust fund kid from old British money and everything, and I had a father who was horribly suppressive to me and my mother and to LRH, and it was an interesting thing. And I followed LRH around from one ACC to the other, and Phoenix and DC and all over the place, because I had the money to do so. So it was a wild ride. I got in late 52, early 53 last lifetime, and followed him around until 1967, and then picked this body up and got back in about 2.5.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it sounds like your memory of this is pretty clear.
Oh yeah. And it was, I didn't realize that I was a past life clear until I was on staff, and I had already been trained. And I recall to the exact moment where I was standing, what I was looking at. I was in the course room supervising as a class 4 auditor, and I was also the org exec sec, so I was over the technical division, and I was course supervising at the time. And I remember the exact moment when I realized that I was a past life clear and everything, and it was sort of like a brick wall that just collapsed in the middle on itself. And it was really amazing. But it wasn't for, gosh, let's see, that would have been 1989. I didn't get the state rehabilitated officially until 2005 with Pierre Ethier, the class 12 that recently passed away in Newmarket, Toronto. So it was a long haul, and it was an unpleasant haul. And I strongly recommend that if there's anybody out there listening to this and you think you might be a past life clear, and we can verify it for you, get it verified sooner rather than later, because it can be a very uncomfortable experience for a being. to deal with that. It's very tedious to not have it acknowledged and realize who and what you really are and why.
What are some of the signs of someone being a past life clear?
Well, they might be a lot more able than the average bear. They might have different viewpoints. They can get things done more. They're not affected by their surroundings so much. They're very, very A to B uptone. They'll probably have pictures that mental image pictures of things that, and it's not just, well, this sounds familiar, but they'll actually know some things and be able to tell you about things. And it's one of those, if you know. And to get it unburdened, sometimes it takes a course, sometimes it takes a little auditing. I've seen it both ways. And for me, it was just standing in the course room supervising, and boom, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I said, I need to get this handled. And the problem with the church is when that was originated to the church, and this was years later at Tampa Org in Florida. I originated that, and they said, nope, we won't do that until you do all of your expanded grades. You need to do them anyway, which is completely false. It should be handled per LRH immediately, not give us $50,000 and we'll audit you and then we'll think about it. That's not okay, and that's not how it should happen. It should be done with either a clear certainty rundown or a Dynetic Clear Special Intensive, which was the predecessor to the clear certainty rundown. And you find out, you get more information, you date locate it, get it all mapped out, verify it. We're looking for a few things, which I can't go into, but if it's verified, it's verified. And then you go from there and you set up a return program to get them back on the grade chart to where they should be, get them all cleaned up and shiny, and off they go to the OT levels. It's just like that. And it doesn't take forever. It's a lot simpler than the church would let you know, but obviously they're going to milk you for as much money as possible. That's what it comes down to. And I'm sorry to be so blunt, but that's the isness of the situation currently. If that,
so
I don't know, I've been out 20 years, so I don't know, it might be different.
Right. Wow. That's interesting. Well, I guess I'll go to the next question here I have.
Okay.
So here's another question I asked that I thought might be worthy asking again. And so in order to be a clear and have everything erased, what needs to be cleared to be a clear? Because I asked if it was the present life traumas, and it wasn't totally that.
Yeah, we talked about that the other day. Well, here's the deal. The definition of a clear is a being who no longer has their own reactive mind. Okay. Now, in saying that, it sounds really deceptively simple, but the reactive mind is composed of many, many different components. And in order to go clear, one has to pull these Dianetic chains. There's also the clearing course, which is that's a whole other ball of wax if a person doesn't go clear on book 1 Dianetics or New Era Dianetics, or back in the 70s it was called Standard Dianetics. And what you're trying to do is you're just trying to empty out that whole hamper of Dianetic engrams, secondaries, and locks on a myriad number of subjects. There's several different rundowns on New Era Dianetics that approach it from one angle, another angle, another angle, another angle, until the bank just collapses. And in order to do that, the PC has to have a significant amount of confront to be able to look at these incidents for what they are. And it isn't just looking at these incidents, it's getting all of the information so that the pre-clear can realize that they made a certain postulate about those incidents to cause those incidents to happen. And that's just the truth of it. Because at the end of the day, in Dianetics, what you're trying to do is you're getting a person to look at these things that are terribly uncomfortable to look at and go, I was there, I was communicating, I created this engram, this secondary, this lock. And once you get that postulate off, boom, now you have an as-isness. They're looking at it, It's no longer a lie. There's nothing there that they aren't looking at, and that's when it erases. So once you get rid of all of this stuff, you've cleared all of this stuff out this lifetime for that person that is clear. Now, that is not to say there is only one reactive mind. There isn't. There are hundreds. I'm going to go as far as to say that could be 100,000 other reactive minds that you have to deal with.
Oh
That's
my.
what you handle on the OT levels. Now, LRH also talks about you're looking at squillions of years on the physical universe time track, and that it doesn't take anywhere even remotely that long to handle all of that stuff, because you're dealing with chains. And when you get the bottom of that chain as far as an engram goes, then you blow the entire chain of events. But you have to get back there first and peel that onion, that charge off to the point to where you get to the beginning of it. And as you get more and more auditing, especially Dianetic auditing, you're able to look at these incidents, and instead of, okay, let's handle the engram now, and the one in the 1950s, and the one in the 1810, and the one in 1776, and then, you know, the one at 1500, and then the one at 1100 BC, you can go from present time now and look at it and blow it on inspection. That's when
What do you
you
mean
know
by
you're
inspection?
in good. Blow by inspection is you look at it, you see it, poof, and you blow the whole chain. This is what happens towards the end of New Era Dianetics, or even in book 1 as well. You can get to a point to where you just go, ah, there it is, and you're looking at it for what it is, because you're in really good shape, and you can go, okay, this is what happened, this is what I had to do with it, this was my postulate. And you know, you as the auditor are having a hard time even keeping up with this because they're handling it so quickly. That's blowing on inspection, instead of, you know, incident, earlier beginning, earlier incident, earlier beginning. They just look at it and, you know, they kind of look at you and go, okay, hold on, we're going to go for bust. This is the basic. Here I was on this planet, and this was happening, and the star was about to explode, and I was trying to get all these people off the planet before the star went supernova, and I didn't achieve to do it, and all the lives were lost, including mine, but I gave it a gallant effort. And my postulate was that I wasn't going to be able to do this. Boom, the guy goes clear. Now, I'm not saying that's how it happens every time, but that's the type of thing. So you almost always, and that's how we got into the conversation the other day, is typically a person will go past life on New Era Dianetics, and should go past life on New Era Dianetics, because that's where the basics on a Dianetic chain are. Not this lifetime. Hubbard says there's nothing in this lifetime that can aberrate you. And if you want to take it a step further, there's nothing that in this universe that can aberrate you except you.
It's kind of like a two-step process. First, someone did it to you, but then earlier than that, you created it.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example of where this goes wrong. I met a girl online. I took her to the Bahamas on a cruise. She had TMJ problems from a car accident, and I was sitting on the deck of the ship. We were floating around the Bahamas and everything, and I said, and you know, it was out gradient for her, but I'm just giving you the example because it's germane. I said, and I think I mentioned this in another podcast, I said, you know, the body problems that a person has ultimately were caused by them. They made a decision. And as soon as we got home, she never spoke to me again, because she couldn't have the fact that she was responsible for her own body problems.
Right. Too steep a gradient.
Too steep a gradient. That's why you have to have objectives, a Purif, Scientology drug rundown, ARC straight wire, communication grade, problems and help grade, overits and withholds, upsets, handling service facsimiles that you use to make yourself right and other people wrong. Well, they hit me, so they're responsible for my body problems. That's pretty much where we were at on it. So you can't tell somebody that. They have to realize it themselves, that they were there, and this is what LRH says, and there's a twofold thing here. They were there and they were communicating. That's the only thing you can be wrong about. You were there, you were communicating, you made a postulate, the star went supernova, in the end, ultimately, no one was to blame because you decided to do that. Now, he also says the only other way you can be wrong is over or underestimation of effort. But that's junior to that. Being there and communicating and over or underestimation of effort. So that's how a Thetan gets wrong, is they underestimate, gosh, I should have gotten there sooner. This is going to take more effort. I'm sorry, Captain, I'm not going to be able to save those people on that planet before the star goes supernova. You could have said that, but you didn't. Instead, you wanted to try and save them. Sometimes you can't. This is how you get into these catch-22 type engrams that stick you on the track at the bottom of a Dianetic chain, just as an example. And of course, it's totally fictitious, but that's how these things happen. And you're looking at chains that are billions of years long in some cases, but a person isn't going to be able to go back billions of years on something without peeling that onion of surface charge more and more, because to the degree that you remove that charge is to the degree that you increase their awareness. So you can't just dive into the deep end of the pool without having the pro course swimming lessons, basically, because you might drown. So you have to take that gradient approach in the auditing. But if a person has a tremendous amount of confront and they're very high toned, they might be able to run neurodynamics before the expanded grades. Do we do that? No, because it's a little unfair to them. And then you'd have to do the expanded grades anyway, because it cleans you up on everything that's going on in life and puts your rudiments in life so that you can talk to the auditor. Your attention isn't on your problems. You're not withholding from the auditor and yourself and other people because of overage and withholds and so on and so forth. So that's the long answer on that one.
So basically, it's a very well-developed system that makes it work almost, or if not 100% of the time. So do it works.
Yeah. And if you don't go clear on neurodynamics, then you do the clearing course, which is the clearing course is an older technology that is also a part of OT2. And the clearing course is handling these things that are still holding down the reactive mind, and you're pulling the locks. And I don't mean it in a Dianetic sense. I mean it as an analog. You're pulling the locks off of the reactive mind on the clearing course, and then you will go clear, and then you proceed on to basically the solo level for a very brief period of time, because you learn that on the clearing course anyway, and then you get onto the OT levels and off to the races. Now, the only thing that would prevent a person from going clear would be if they were horribly a potential trouble source and had a lot of suppression in their lives. But that's something that should and would always be caught way ahead of time. So that's typically not an issue these days. Back in the early 60s, before the PTSSP tech was developed, that did happen. And it's important to note that it wasn't until 1964 that we even knew what a floating needle on the meter meant. So anything before 1964, if a person went release on a particular grade, there wasn't even a grade chart until 1965. And that was extremely basic compared to what we have now. LRH, if somebody went clear, they had to schedule an appointment, go wherever he was at, and sit down with him, and he would speak to them and ask them questions and everything, and he would sign off on whether they were clear or not, long before 25 years before we had the Dianetic Clear Special Intensive. And so a lot of people went clear, a lot of people went release, and didn't know it, because we didn't know what a floating needle was, to say, okay, that's the end of that process. Now go see the examiner and verify that state, get the data to the case supervisor. Yeah, this guy looks clear. Okay, let's do the Dianetic Clear Special Intensive, the CCRD, and find out, get it cleaned up, and give him his certificate so that he can move on. And in my case, I went clear in 1956. And it wasn't acknowledged. It wasn't acknowledged until the 60s, the mid 60s, because we just didn't have those tools. Now we do. So it's much more codified and streamlined based off of the earlier basics. And that's all he tried to do, was streamline it off of those basics, to the point that when somebody does go clear, you know it, and you can verify it, validate them on it, because you don't want to overrun them. But the opposite side of this is the Ned for OTs band and all of the new OT levels that came out in 77, 78. The knots material was developed off of almost a mistake, because what was happening is standard Dianetics was working so well that people were going clear, didn't know it, and then were mocking up more case and then falling ill and doing poorly in life because they had gone past clear, it hadn't been acknowledged, and LRH was one of these people. If you can believe that. That actually happened. He was catatonic, bedridden, and the upper executives in Scientology came to David Mayo, who was his top tech guy at the time, and said, Dave, we need your help. LRH is in rough shape. We got to do something about this. David Mayo went in, did some assists on him, tried some things out, and from that was Ned for OTs, knots, was developed and used as a solution to people that had been audited past Dianetic clear. And that then developed into a rundown. And then LRH said, we've got something much greater here than this. And then took that data and turned it into new OT4, new OT5, 6, and 7. So it's interesting how this thing developed, because we didn't have that tech to know that somebody had gone past Dianetic clear and what caused it, which was the upper OT levels material, until 1978. So
wow,
it's an interesting backstory.
So if someone's going through the massive amount of audios and books, and there's been such a development, do you suggest someone to start at 1950 Los Angeles or the Oakland or standard procedure, start from there and go through all the years, or is there a specific time you would suggest, like, hey, you should start here to learn what we already figured out instead of getting confused?
Well, and that's an excellent question, and it's something that bears a little communication about, because when you look at that, when you look at the material, let's say you're just looking at a transcript or you're listening to it, and he's saying, this is what we do right now. You have to keep it in the context of what we do right now was 1952 or 1951 or 1950. I mean, and I mentioned this before in other podcasts. Early on in 1950, when they were auditing Dianetics, he came out and said, hey, look, this past life stuff, it's a bunch of malarkey. Don't believe it. And then the very next day, he said, you remember what I said about this past life stuff being a bunch of malarkey? Well, I was full of malarkey, and it is true, and this is a fact, and there will be no betterment of a case unless you accept that. Do not invalidate somebody who goes past life in a Dianetic session. Now, that's 1950. So this same thing started happening, and he was looking for a better route to clear, a more stable route to clear, for another, well, basically 2 decades after that. So the viewpoint at that time needs to be taken in the context of that's the viewpoint at that time. And my suggestion is, more than anything, is to learn the modern data. And then once you understand it well enough, to then go back and do the lineage. We have a public who's a completed OT7. It took him 10 years. He's listened to every single recorded lecture and read the transcript and word clear them over a course of 10 years. We actually have another guy on our lines that's done it twice, and is doing it again in a new unit of time and gets more out of it each time. So there's a lot of valuable data in there, but those procedures and techniques were always leaning towards how there's got to be a better way, and so on. And you get into the 1961 to 1966 with the St. Hill Special Briefing Course, where there was tons of experimental processes to get to clear and everything. And almost all of them, of those special techniques, were mothballed by LRH ultimately.
What do you mean by mothballed?
They were taken out of use. They were
taken out of use. Okay.
Yeah, they were mothballed because they were too hard to audit. both by the auditor, and they were difficult for the pre-clears to keep up with, and you were looking at hundreds and hundreds of hours to do this stuff for a better route to clear. And then ultimately what happened is, after all of that was discovered, there were bits and pieces that were taken and put onto the OT levels. He understood the reactive mind better and was able to develop the OT levels, the clearing course. And guess what? At the end of the day, we went back to, and these are his words, not mine, good old Dianetics. Poor old Dianetics was the best way to make clears. And so he modernized that using a meter around about 1967 to 1971, issued Standard Dianetics, which is a book that basically is the entire check sheet and all the references. And you could go to the bookstore, buy that book, read it, apply it, and go make clears, which was resulted in the biggest boom in Scientology ever because of Standard Dianetics. And then roundabout 1976, and Dan Kuhn, who used to work with LRH at the ranch there, he mentioned to LRH, he said, "Sir, what about this particular thing in Dianetics?" I don't remember what it was specifically, but he asked him, and LRH looked over his shoulder and said to him, he said, "I didn't write that." And so LRH got some Sea Org members together, and they went in and they totally rewrote and added to Standard Dianetics to make it New Era Dianetics, even in as late as 1977. Now, that seems like a long time ago, but it was just yesterday that from 1950 to 1977, people were trying to change the tech out of LRH's purview. He found out about it and went in there and said, okay, we're going to make this better. We're going to pull all this extraneous false data out. And now we have New Era Dianetics because of that. And that was the last, along with NED for OTs, those were the last two real big pushes in the technology before LRH passed away, 9 years later. And in between that, he wrote the Mission Earth series and Battlefield Earth, two of the best science fiction stories, not in my opinion, but in other great science fiction authors' opinions. He got that done because he wanted to go back to what he loved, and he put the tech in those stories as well, the Scientology and Dianetic tech in there as well as little Easter eggs. It's all it permeates throughout it. So he never stopped trying to build a better bridge, but he's also asked us to build a better bridge since 1950 all the way to now, and that's what we're trying to do. Ron Zorg came up with their OT levels that add to LRH's OT levels past OT8 all the way up to OT 48, which we also deliver.
OT 48?
48.
48. So not 15, but
48.
Many more.
Yeah. Now,
wow.
like I said, LRH, the real OT8 apparently never ever got released by the church because they found it to be too controversial. We talked about that the other day. Whether it's true, whether it's not true, what I've seen in the Fishman documents, I can no better tell you, is there an atmosphere on the moon? Is it breathable? Is it not? Is there water on the moon? I couldn't tell you. All I know is that somebody is saying this is that data, and the church came up with 3 versions of OT8 on their own, none of which really get the end phenomena of, but if you do Excalibur, which is Ron Zorg's version of it based off of Bill Robertson's stuff, the gains that you can get from Excalibur alone are incredible. And it's just a very minor extension of LRH's NED for OTs. It's instead of objective, dealing with the body, you're dealing subjectively with the being from the Knott's case perspective. And it is an amazing technology, and I think LRH would be proud of it because it's based off of things that he says in the NED for OTs materials on OT5 in the Knott series. So, the bridge is much bigger than people think, and you can get an awful lot of gain out of that. I mean, it's, for me, it's like, okay, well, I've done everything I can do. I know there's more case to handle there on my part and for other PCs or pre-OTs. Well, you can either park yourself or you can avail yourself of what is out there. And if it's true for you, it's true for you. So that's what you do if you want to. We give people the option to do that, or they can park themselves until a later date, whatever that date is.
Wow. You're dropping the nuggets here. That's amazing.
It's a lot of data.
So it really is. I hope everyone drops you a like on this video here on this podcast, because you really do just share this information. That's one of the things I'm really impressed about with you is you're not really holding back. Maybe some really high level stuff where it doesn't make sense to talk about it, but you really are just very open and sharing your experience and information, which I think is amazing.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So when someone is a clear, they have no more of their own reactive mind. So would you say that this person doesn't get triggered anymore?
I would say that they would be a lot less able to be keyed in. Now, that is not to say, when somebody says, well, OTs don't get ARC broken, which is upset, or OTs,
Okay.
don't get upset at all. Where does it say that? Take that up with LRH. I mean, an OT can move up and down the tone scale at will. They can be pissed off 1 minute and they can be in serenity of beingness the next, if the situation warrants it. But if
Right.
you see somebody getting their head cut off in a video in the Middle East, are you going to just sit there and go, okay, I'm just going to grant that guy cutting that guy's heads off some beingness? Hell no. You're going to get pissed off about it and go, that's an injustice. That wasn't self-determined. Where did you get that? You see what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
you're responsible for your own tone level. And as LRH says, emotion is used to get a desired result. So, you can be magnanimous about it and go in and say, okay, everybody, we're going to retool the office and we're going to change everything. The statistics are down quite rapidly this week, and we need to fix these things. And honestly, that's the way you should do it. You shouldn't go in there chewing everybody a new ass. That's not the way to operate on it. But given the situation, it's up to that particular OT or clear to decide what needs to be done. And that's not just through auditing. You have to get the training to understand the mechanics behind this and what does it take, because intention is cause. If you sit there and say, stop cutting those people's heads off, I say right now, are they going to stop cutting those people's heads off? Probably not, unless you have one hell of a strong intention, which some people have. I'm not saying that can't happen, but sometimes you've got to do a little bit more than that and take some action and kick some ass. Is it okay to yell at people to get things done? I don't agree with that. I don't think that you should have to do that. Do I get pissed off sometimes? Hell yes, I get pissed off sometimes. Do I let myself get pissed off is the question. Yes. That is up to the being. Does that make it okay? Sometimes not. Sometimes I get a little reactive about things when I see things that are unjust, and you can't just bulldoze your way through with people. You have to be diplomatic. I have no stomach for politics. I'm not great at being diplomatic in certain situations on things where I've seen injustices that still have not been righted. And there's an awful lot of that on planet Earth with 8 billion reactive minds. So sometimes, you got to open up a can of whoop ass to get some things done. LRH did that. Sometimes I think, based off of the stories, whether they're true or not, my own experience with him was mankind had no better friend than LRH. He was a great guy. He had an ego, rightfully so. Sometimes it got in the way, and he didn't like to go in session with anybody that he couldn't control, which violates the definition of in sessionness, which is, willing to talk to the auditor and interested in own case. And he would pick auditors that he could control. That's not okay. Not okay. And it's part of the reason why he probably did not live as long as he could have, because people were afraid of him. And that shouldn't have happened. And he should have had better friends, especially in the end. I don't know if you know that story, but he was basically murdered and was on a visceral because he had pancreatitis or pancreatitis. I think it's pancreatitis is the way it's pronounced. And he was about to be subpoenaed by the IRS, and they wanted to prevent that. The guys in the Sea Org, Miscavige being one of them, I know several of the guys that were around at that time, and none of them are upstanding individuals. And instead of taking care of him and getting him handled, they took him off of his medication that was preventing him from feeling the pain of this pancreatitis, and he died in the back of his Bluebird RV.
Oh
And
my.
they went and gambled his money in Reno while he lay there dying in the back of his Bluebird RV. What?
Wow.
Yeah. So somebody should have opened a can of whoop ass and kicked those guys out of the church immediately and said, Ron, we're gonna get you the help that you need. Now people could say, well, if he's such an OT, why did he have these problems? Well, you know what? You have to take care of each other. Nobody's perfect. And sometimes a brother needs help. And he died pretty much friendless and separated from his wife. And she didn't even know that he had died until they announced it and said, well, he's continuing his researches, which, was just a bullshit story to baffle him with bullshit instead of dazzle them with brilliance when they murdered him. So,
Wow.
Nobody's perfect and absolutes are unobtainable. We've all got to help each other. And that's the importance of this whole thing, is that you have to use the tone level that is necessary in order to get the job done. And sometimes that might not just be serenity of beingness, because the physical universe is difficult. And like he says, it's a rough universe, and even the tigers have a hard time surviving. And if you're going to survive, you got to be a tiger. And we all know how tigers are. So
Right.
what's true for you is true for you on that, but that's my viewpoint.
So basically, I mean, we're all going to feel emotion.
Yeah.
But you're allowing yourself to choose it. And so it's not an irrational emotion you have coming out. It's really rational emotion, more so. So you're not being triggered in that sense where it's uncontrollable.
Right. What does the situation call for? I'll give you an example that's fictitious, but did you ever see Spock kick somebody's ass in Star Trek?
I haven't watched much Star Trek, so I can't say.
Well, Spock, who was a Vulcan and didn't let, even though he was a half breed, he was half human, half Vulcan in Star Trek. He controlled his human side, but when the need called for it, he would kick some ass because he had to, because it was logical. It wasn't reactive. It was logical to do so.
Yeah. So basically, when you go clear and you no longer have a reactive mind, you'll still feel emotions, but you'll be in more control and more decisive about it.
Yeah. And like we were saying yesterday, clear is a really good start.
Right. So when you're clear, you've only cleared one reactive mind, and then there's more to go.
Your reactive mind, but there are other reactive minds that you have to deal with. More on that later on the OT levels, but it is not something that cannot be done. And this, as we were talking yesterday, I believe, LRH says that at the lower levels, you really have no comprehension for the amount of gain that you can get on the OT levels in handling these other reactive minds until you get there, where typically, like I said yesterday, 2.5 divisions of tone arm motion, which is a rate of case improvement or change on the lower levels, and is good by LRH's standards. On the OT levels, you could have anywhere in the neighborhood of anywhere between 12 and 50 or more. I've had several sessions where I had 50 or more divisions of case gain in a session, and it was verifiable to the degree that I was there, it was happening, and I was controlling the meter properly to get that actual amount of case gain in a session, which is incredible to get. There is so much case gain to be had on the upper levels, but you have to peel that onion in order to be able to get there, to avail yourself of those types of gains. So it does happen, and if done standardly, you will experience it.
Would you say it's an exponential benefit that happens over time?
Absolutely.
As you continue going through? Yeah.
Absolutely. It is exponential. And towards the end of the latter part of the OT levels, LRH, and it's not a confidential thing per se, but he says you have to look at that which you are handling on neurodynamics for OTs, OT 5, 6, 7, and a little bit on 4 as well. You you're not only helping yourself, but you are helping a multitude of other beings at the same time. So it's going to have a cumulative effect on society. And that is very much the case. And somebody could say, well, things aren't looking really great right now. Well, it's a matter of perspective, it's a matter of reality, and it's a matter of awareness that you are freeing beings on a very large scale on the upper OT levels that is basically getting stuff out of your universe that is impeding you, much like a resistor does in electronics. And with those reactive minds gone, okay, now you can impinge, you can intend, you can postulate. I mentioned this before on the podcast. When I was at the end of New OT7, I frightened myself. I was postulating things so fast, seeing into the future, knowing when people were coming and to my shop, what they looked like, what car they were driving, what they were going to say, what they were going to buy, what they were going to do, all of that stuff, because you get out in front of the physical universe vis-a-vis the theta universe, because you have cleared all of this resistance of other reactive minds out of your universe, and they're no longer holding you back. It would be sort of like cutting all the bonds on a horse from a carriage and saying, run, horse, run. Very much like that. And the horse
And
can
so
do
you
what they
say
want.
that, so you say that this can affect other people as you are going through these types of clearings. Is that similar to when we talked yesterday, or I believe, when you clear a valence, you can clear that person through you. Is it in that kind of way? So then you're clearing like maybe people in your life or people in past lives that you continue to manifest.
Well, I will get to the end of it and just kind of cut to the chase.
Okay.
Ultimately, what's happening on Ned for OTs is you're creating clears at a mad rate. I can say that much. You're creating clears at a mad rate. The only difference is you're not dealing with a being in a body. Okay? That is what is happening. So you are dealing with people telepathically, beings telepathically, who are no longer connected corporally. And in so doing, you are changing society at a wholesale exponential level. And the more people you have on Ned for OTs, the more good you are doing for the planet at large and the universe at large, as far as beings and the physical universe, because it is a positive change in what those beings will affect upon the physical universe. But yeah, it's safe to say that you are wholesale clearing by the end of the upper OT levels.
And is that a major drive that you're basically helping and clear the universe?
I mean, it's more of a side effect, to be perfectly honest.
Okay.
It's more of a side effect of what you're doing. What you're trying to do is you're trying to handle its influence on your universe and what's holding you back. Now, the reasons for this obviously are confidential and go beyond the scope of the conversation. And it's just, you want to find out more about it, get going on your bridge, basically, is what I would tell our listeners. But the fact of the matter is that things are not what they seem, and that things are far, far, far more different than you could ever imagine and you are aware of at this current point at the lower end of the bridge than you will be at the upper end of the bridge. And when you see this, you will start to say, by God, I need to do something about this. And that's why we do what we do at AOGP, because somebody has to hold the line here, because the church sure as hell isn't doing it anymore. If I told you what the church does on the upper levels versus what LRH does and suggests to do on the upper levels as far as Ned for OTs, you would be blown away at the manipulation that they are foisting fraudulently upon people that have paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to get there, and do have the intent of, they think they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, but they're being lied to in the way and the manner that they're supposed to be doing it, and it isn't the way LRH intended. To me, that is the saddest of sad things, that this is happening inside the church, and it's wrong, wrong, wrong. We don't do that, and we're trying to fix that because LRH isn't here at the moment to help with it. I don't care why that is. All I know that it is, and by God, I'm going to do something about it.
I mean, amen to that.
So there's a lot of clearing to be done on this planet, and it might sound unicorns, flowers, and rainbows-ish, but the fact of the matter is that this stuff works, and if you do what he says, you'll get the results. And if the more people that are doing it, the greater the change overnight you can see in the physical universe, Thetan plus body on this planet, you can see. And like I've said before, Scientology doesn't have all the answers, but by God, it gives you the information to do what needs to be done to find those answers out. There is no better database of information that you can operate off of, because this guy knew what he was talking about, and you can get the job done if you listen to what he says.
Yeah. So, off of the bridge, there's various rundowns to do, right? Some that are not standard or needed, some that are, I guess, optional, or
yeah, I mean, a lot of them are for certain situations. One of the ones that you can do is the false purpose rundown, which handles evil purposes and false purposes. The church uses false purpose rundown almost ad nauseum, because Miscavige operates off of the viewpoint that everybody else has false and evil purposes like he does. So he's basically, what's the term? I always forget the word. He's projecting on everybody else his own overts. Yeah, is what he's doing. Similar overt of his own, which is not the case. Not everybody needs false purpose rundown. It's fabulous. And if you have any evil purposes, well, okay, we can handle them. But the thing is LRH says all evil purposes come from the upper level knots case. They are not yours. They come from that band. And so his solution originally was expanded Dianetics. That handled evil purposes. Then he came up with the false purpose rundown, which is the Scientology version of handling evil purposes at the lower end of the bridge. So otherwise, the evil purposes get handled on Ned for OTs on the OT levels. But Miscavige thinks that everybody needs hours and hours and hours and hours of false purpose rundown when they don't. And there's lots of other rundowns, but they're all catered to, for the most part, something that is preventing somebody from going up the standard bridge. Let's handle that, and then we can return them back to the standard bridge. And they're all great rundowns, but if it isn't needed, it isn't needed. So, like the L's, for example, those were created by LRH for people who were in the Sea Org originally, that he needed them to be OT now, not 2 years from now. And so he developed these processes in order to short circuit the bridge and get these guys a bunch of horsepower now, as opposed to 2 years from now. And then decided, okay, let's make this a public action. Does it circumvent having to do the grades? Absolutely not. He says it can be done anywhere on the bridge. That's true. L11 can be done, and the efficacy of it is great. You can do it anywhere on the bridge. In my opinion, you can take LRH's opinion all you want, and Pierre ETA told me the same thing. He said L10 and L12, much better to do after OT3, because you've gotten that huge chunk of case out of the way, and you're not going to have to deal with all these other reactive minds that get in the way and audit that in order to get the result that you can get from the L's. So it's not perfect, and you can do them, but you're not going to run nearly as deeply as you would if you did them after OT3 for L10 and L12. So that's another set of rundowns that you can do to really boost your horsepower. And there's a ton of them on the chart behind me, but they're usually specific case scenarios where somebody's PTS and they need a PTS rundown, and they need a suppressed person rundown, and they need a bright think rundown, or interiorization rundown. Almost everybody needs an interiorization rundown at some point, because they've keyed in. An interiorization rundown handles the key ends that happen from past births and past deaths. So let's say you're on an auditing process and you go exterior, and that's great. We don't shoot for that anymore, but it's great if you do. But what happens a lot of the time is, especially early on in auditing, when you go exterior, it keys in these past deaths and past births that shoots the case mental mass way up, and you can't audit over it. So you have to do an interiorization, exteriorization rundown in order to handle those key ends of past births and deaths to the point to where the person no longer has that in restimulation, and now you can get back onto the show with the regular grade chart. So that's something that almost everybody does at some point, and sometimes they even have to do another one called the end of endless int rundown, which is the Scientology version, especially after clear, if it gets keyed in again. So, there's a tool for pretty much everything. This guy pretty much had it all solved. I haven't seen anything where I couldn't resolve it with one of his tools. The only thing I cannot resolve, because I cannot resolve it, or our auditors cannot resolve it, is if somebody has an ethics situation. And if that ethics situation is so bad, they're not going to get any gains from auditing, because they're committing present time overts and withholds that prevent them from moving anywhere as a case.
What would be an example of that?
Sleeping with their neighbor while married to another woman. This is as simple as I can get it. Because
okay.
What's happening is, and this is what LRH says, we mentioned this in other podcasts as well, is you've got ethics, tech, admin. Ethics has to be in order for the tech to go in order for the administration to go in. So if you've got ethics going on, the person isn't going to get any worthwhile, stable gains, because you need to say, hey, look, you shouldn't be sleeping around on your wife. You need to handle that. And it can go all the way down to, you and your wife aren't getting along. Well, there's an ethics situation there as well. Now in the church, they're going to say, they're going to tell you what to do and how to do it. We don't do that, because what the church doesn't do and we do is in LR8 says this, ethics is a personal thing. Let's take that one step further. LRH also says we do not get involved in another person's second dynamic activity unless it's stopping them from being on course or it's stopping their auditing. Now, when you say stopping their auditing, what does that mean? If they're sleeping with their neighbor and they're married to another woman, it's stopping their auditing, because they're not going to get any gain, and you're wasting their time and their money and your time. So you have to say, look, I'm not trying to tell you what to do here, but would you want somebody sleeping around on you? Would you want your wife sleeping around on you? Probably not. And then if they said, well, I've got an open relationship and she's okay with it. Okay. Now our listeners might say, well, wow, that's a pretty broad brush. But the fact of the matter is, if the wife's okay with it, he's okay with it, the neighbor's okay with it, and nobody has a problem with it, I'm not going to get involved. We'll continue your auditing. And if you're getting gains and that's copacetic with you, okay. Typically that isn't the case. And you don't want to commit overts, because it's something you're doing that you wouldn't want somebody doing to you, and it's going to stall you right where you're at. But ethics is a personal thing, and that has to be looked at that way. And you have to be very diplomatic about it and not enforce. That's what the church does. So ethics has to be in for the tech to go in, for admin to go in. And it's a case-by-case situation, but out ethics is the only thing that will prevent a person from having any worthwhile, long-lasting case gain. So that has to be addressed first, then the tech can go in. So that's the only thing we can't fix. Is you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him to drink, is the TLDR on that.
Yeah. So it's really a person's own decision that it comes down to.
Yeah. And I'll be blunt. If you're in a situation where you're in an open relationship and your wife's sleeping with other people and you're sleeping with other people, there's something there you're not confronting. I'm just going to be honest. Okay. And that's aberration. That's second dynamic aberration. And LRH talks about this a lot. Second dynamic aberration does nothing but destroy an organization, no matter whether it's two people or it's the Roman Empire. That's what destroyed the Roman Empire, is their second dynamic folded in up on itself. And that's why it is so important to prevent that sort of aberration in an organization, because it will just go belly up. And you've got that going on with the Sea Org right now in the Church of Scientology, the corporate Church of Scientology. They prevent people from having children because it takes them off of their post in the Sea Org. And if you have a kid, now this was 1988, 1987. Back then, if you had a kid and you were in the Sea Org, they shipped you off to a lower org, like a regional org, like Kansas City org. They shipped you and your husband and your kid off there and said, you stay there and work in that organization until the kid's old enough to become a cadet in the Sea Org, and then you can come back. It's their problem. We don't want it. It doesn't work. So this was a year after LRH died. I haven't looked at all the executive directives and stuff like that. I don't agree with what I've seen in a lot of cases. I think the Sea Org was a great idea to start, and it went horribly wrong. That's my opinion. I think there are better ways to go about that. My opinion is share the wealth with people, give everybody a good life to where they have a decent quality of life. They can survive, you can survive, everybody expands, everybody wins, and everything gets done. That's not what happens with the Sea Org, and we've seen where this ended up. That's my opinion. LRH felt differently at the time. I'm not going to argue with him, but I would have done it differently. And it's really given them a black eye, given the fact that he's no longer around and Miscavige has turned it into the biggest goat fuck ever. Sorry to be blunt, but that's the honest to God situation. And there's an awful lot of people in the Sea Org that deserved a better life for the amount they gave their lives away and are stuck in a Scientology old folks home, not allowed to go out in public because they're deathly afraid of them telling people of what the realities are of the horrors that they are committing, both to public and to people, based off of their own aberrations, not LRH's aberrations. And that's where people go wrong. And they think Hubbard came up with all this stuff. No. This is post-Hubbard. This is Miscavige's nightmare. It's not Hubbard's nightmare. LRH wasn't perfect, but goddamn, he is no David Miscavige by any means. That's where things went wrong. And Miscavige took over the church and bullied his way to the top. Hubbard didn't have anything to do with that and never assigned him that post and never put him on post. So there's that.
You mentioned exterioration. Is this similar to like if someone does remote viewing or astral travel?
Same thing.
Same thing.
Same thing.
It's just triggered in at some point, or you have a release and just get shot out, or
well, it either happens uncontrollably, or you get to a point to where you've gotten enough charge off the case that you can do it at will. Which, yeah, I mean, it's not what we're driving for again, but it does happen, and that's part of the reason of the demise of the Church of Scientology in the first place. Is once the shadow governments got word of the fact that Hubbard had this technology that could allow them to not have any secrets, well, then they had to take it over. Because the last thing they want is their withholds being gotten off by somebody going exterior with full perception and saying, you guys are murdering people in mass because you want to sell more tanks.
right?
I mean, that's what it comes down to. So they had to take it over. And that's what they did. That's the long and the short of it. And that's where Hal Puthoff and Ingo Swann and all that stuff is they infiltrated the church. The church screwed up, let them in, didn't make sure that they weren't allowed to those materials, and they made off with them. And now we've got the existence that we've got. Unfortunately.
So you did the exercise with me where you asked me what was your highest tone or best moment in life, and I imagined one, and I saw myself outside myself. And so was I exterior on some level
Well,
Are we exterior in those moments?
You're always exterior to some level. I mean, your viewpoint is going to be exterior to the body if you're not a potential trouble source, is what it comes down to. Now, exterior with full perception is when that typically happens at the lower end of the bridge after a big win on an auditing process. Is it stable? More often than not, no. That's the difference, is you can get exteriorized for a while and then you're going to go back in. And that's what Hubbard found. And so he went for that in the beginning and realized it wasn't stable and said, okay, this isn't stable. That's not what we're going for anymore. We need to clear the reactive mind because these things key back in. The mass pulls back in. But at any given time, if you're not a potential trouble source, you can look back at any moment in your life and see it external to the body because that's where you're seeing it from. It's only temporary that you're seeing it from the body's eyes. It's not permanent.
And is it in different layers and dimensions or different perceptics at different times? Because you go back and you're thinking in the memory, but you weren't thinking or observing like that in the moment.
You could almost say that it's at different layers, depending on whether you're keyed in or not, whether you're not keyed in or not, whether you're being suppressed or whether you're not being suppressed, because that's what causes it, is because it's a valence issue. You're either being yourself or you're being somebody else. When you're being somebody else, zoop, right back into the body you go, and everything you see will be from the body's viewpoint, the limited viewpoint of the viewing angle perspective of two eyes, where a Thetan sees in 360 degrees. LRH says that, and I can confirm and verify that.
So if a person is completely free of all the valences, then that's the state they would be in?
Yep. And that's how and why what you do on the upper OT levels is you get rid of these other valence influences. That's all I can say.
Oh, that makes a little more sense. Wow. Okay.
And there's a lot of them.
Okay. So self-analysis is a version of straight wire, right?
Yeah.
Those exercises.
Yep.
So if you go through self-analysis book, do you still have to go through the ARC straight wire?
Well, ARC straight wire consists of the entire set of processes in self-analysis, along with a host of other processes that you do that are part of ARC straight wire as a gradient approach. And the self-analysis lists are smack dab in the middle of ARC straight wire. But what you're trying to do on ARC straight wire is two things. One, you're trying to improve the person's recall. But more importantly, what you're doing is you're improving the person's recall through running them through locks, Dianetic locks, and running those locks off of the case from a positive side, not a negative side. And when you're getting them to recall the time they smelled the wildflower and what was the color or what was the scent or what was the tactile sense. And this peels off these locks that are holding things in place. And the end phenomena of Scientology straight wire is that the person realizes that he or she will no longer be getting any worse. And they know that there is a way out because those locks have been peeled off. That's the primary thing of it. And the recall is, dare I say, a bit of a side effect, but a really good one at that.
Right. Okay. So you could go through self-analysis, and would that give you a head start with the ARC straight wire? You still would do the whole thing again, just run by someone else?
No, you wouldn't even do it again. If you've done the list,
Oh,
you've done the
really?
lists. Yeah. And
Okay.
that's out of the way, because when it's done, it's done. And we give people the license that we assume that if they've done it, that's fine. Maybe somebody else would say, oh, well, you're going to have to do it again. I mean, you could check it and say, do you have any, you could check it on the meter and say, is list 1 unflat on the meter? And if it reads, okay, then we would take it up. So it can be done and you can verify it. But I myself tend to take people at face value and say, have you done self-analysis? Have you done all the lists? Well, I've only done up to 4. Okay. You remember where you were at? Okay. Then let's take up from there and go from 4 to 7, for example. If they've done all of them and they're very good indicators on it, when I say, so you did the self-analysis list, right? And the needle floats, I'm going to go, okay, check, next.
Nice.
Let's get on with the show.
Yeah. Yeah, because you seem to have this outlook and to really go up the bridge with some speed and not be hanging around with it.
Yeah, I mean, given the current situation on planet Earth as of today, and this is February 23rd, 2024, there is no time to be wasted. Run up the bridge. LRH said in 1952, we have a limited amount of time before the technology gets to a certain point where things will be shut down and you no longer will have the right to practice religion freely. Now, people could say, well, we're nowhere near that. Well, I got news for you. It's a lot closer than you think. And if we were to have, let's just say it wasn't even done by anybody on the planet. If there was an EMP solar flare, okay, an upper X class solar flare, which has happened in the past in the 1800s, it's been over 100 years. If that were to happen, we would be thrown back into the Stone Age. Every meter on the planet that had a battery in it would not work again. Okay, that is all I am saying. Just with that data alone, that's enough reason for me to say, okay, because we use theta meters. If my computers are connected or out in the open and aren't surrounded by a Faraday cage, and we have an X-class flare that causes an EMP issue, it's over. It's over. And it's going to take, it would take a couple of years to restart these coal generators and everything, because you have to have energy to start these things up. And God knows what could happen there. And I'm not some doom or gloom or anything like that. But the thing is yeah, you can have solar panels and you could run a meter off of that. Yeah, but did you have a meter that wasn't out in the open and subject to this gamma ray? No. Okay. Well, now you're going to have to build a new one. Got a schematic? Do you have the parts?
Right.
I mean, I could go on and on and on, but you know, it's just obvious that even with that, and it wasn't caused by man, we have a problem. So that's my viewpoint on it is, you know, you could put it off and dilly dally around, but it takes less than 2 years to go from the bottom to the top of the bridge. Sometimes shorter, maybe a little bit longer, depending on the case, but the gains are worth it. And now is your opportunity, and you might not have another opportunity for a very, very long time, whether it's on this planet or another one. As crazy as that sounds, that's my reality. People can take it or leave it.
And so it seems like the first step to get started is to get a personality test. Is that one of the first things that you suggest?
Get a personality test. Let's see where you're at. You know, whether you have any suppression going on in your life. If you do, we've got a solution for that. It's very short, very, very, very short, and it's free. If you don't, well, then you can get on some co-auditing. You can buy some auditing. We can loan you a theta meter and we can get you up the bridge. And you can also be on course. Training and processing go hand in hand. 50% of the gains are from training, 50% are from processing. But it's just a matter of starting. Don't put it off, because honestly, there isn't any other thing that you could do better that would improve your life and the lives of others around you quicker, more efficiently, and that you could be happier and far more at cause. And it's important to note that which you understand, you cannot be the adverse effect of. And Scientology is knowing how to know. And if you understand this data that he has, that's free on our website, and you start reading this stuff and you start applying it, your life will change that day forever and into the future. If you keep applying it, clear your words, use it, help others with it, because you're not going to make it out of the soup on your own and just go off and live on a mountaintop as an OT. You won't be OT for very long. You got to help others do it. And OTs work best in numbers together, and you can get something done, and we can turn this rock around before it's too late. Again, and this isn't the first time this has happened. All of the societies on the backtrack went the same way. He's absolutely right. I can tell you with complete certainty that man will eat themselves alive in one form of a body or another, to the point to where they look for solutions to stop others from preventing them from creating. And that's where everything goes upside down and kablooey. So
Wow.
here we are.
Yeah, I found the personality test intriguing because I took it. I got the score. You emailed me the graph of the 10 different scores. And then we did another call where you explained it to me. And it's amazing. You did this all for free without any commitment or anything, which was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So I really suggest anyone to give this a shot and meet Jonathan and get a feel for him and see what you can do. And it was interesting because you're telling me what a lot of the stuff meant. And I went in with an open mind, but I wasn't believing you initially. It was almost like this resistance. And then I talked to my girlfriend and she's like, so how did it go? And I'm like, he told me this information. I'm like, I don't even remember the negative stuff he told me. It was almost like I shut it out until, I look back at my notes and pulled up another site that has more of the information so I can decode it again. Like, oh, he told me that, this. So just an observation, really. Now, it makes me think, you tell me information and then I don't remember it. Is that like the unconsciousness?
Well, it's interesting that you should ask that, because it's very similar to auditing, because you'll go in and you'll do an auditing process and you get your socks blown off and you're like, what was it? What was it? I realized, huh? Because what's happened is you've looked at this aberration for what it is, and you've made a perfect duplicate over the top of it, to the point to where you can't remember it anymore because there's nothing there to remember anymore. So when you indicate something to somebody that is true, a lot of times they will forget it because you've as is that thing. And I've had it happen with me in several of occasions on L11 with Pierre. I did this process and it was a whole track thing and all this stuff. And for years and years and years, for the life of me, I could not remember what the hell the question was that he asked me. But I could remember what I told him about it, but I couldn't remember the question. And it completely changed my life and the outlook on my life. And when I went and looked in the mirror in the hotel room after the session with him that night, I looked different physically. My face changed. And that's something that happens with auditing a lot of the time, because these masses blow and they move around it. And then back in the early 70s, they used to take Polaroids and cut it down the middle. So the right and the left hemisphere, and they keep taking Polaroids of you. As you progressed in auditing, they'd show your left hemisphere of your face at the beginning of the bridge and after grade 4, and you go, Jesus, these aren't even the same people.
Wow.
That's how much these masses change on the body. And it's not that important, but it is an interesting test. So it's important to say that when you can't remember things from auditing, or there's been some indication, chances are that there's some charge that has been blown upon that indication. I will send you your answers after we get done with the podcast so that you can have them and compare, so you can remember what it was we talked about, because a lot of the times it's that accurate that you're just like, what in the world was that?
Right. But then with time to think about it, I'm like, actually, I can think last week I did this thing and that's exactly what he said. And so
yeah,
there's definitely a level of confront with this that just is going to push your barriers, I think.
Yeah. And you're pointing it out. And that's why I said, when I did it with you, that, don't shoot the messenger. This isn't me evaluating. And like LRH says in Science of Survival, it's not evaluation if it's true. Because if you say there's a guy burning a house down over there, and you go, hey, that guy's burning a house down. And then a Scientologist comes along and says, that's N Theta. You shouldn't be talking about that. What? He's burning a house down. Do you see my point? And that's where the church is at on that, is they're like, well, you shouldn't be talking about that. They restrict communication. and you can't talk about the subject anymore or make any evaluations. So when a guy's burning a house down, you shouldn't be saying that because you're interpolating the person that's hearing it. What?
Mm-hmm.
What? So it's important to note that you shouldn't evaluate for somebody and you shouldn't invalidate somebody, but it is an evaluation if it's true. And if you give a proper evaluation to somebody, chances are you're indicating some sort of charge there, whether it's out ethics, some aberration. And when you do, they'll go, huh? Yeah, you're right. I mean, we do that all the time with people, and you're not even a Scientologist. That proves that you don't have to be a Scientologist to do these things. Hubbard just figured this stuff out, gave it some terms, and gave you the understanding of it so that you could go out and you could do something about life where nobody had ever quantified that in the past. That's one of the things that the personality test does, is it says, yeah, I could be in a lot better state, but you wouldn't have known it otherwise. And the test is spooky accurate.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, there's that.
Right. My next question, and you kind of started to go over this by the facial changes, and I've heard this from other people too. And I was wanted to ask, like, with people you've worked with or individuals you've been around and heard stories of, what have been some of the biggest changes in somebody going through the bridge in their lives?
Jeez. Well, I think some of the most instantaneous things is I've seen people's faces change in front of me on Zoom doing remote auditing with a Theta Meter, right in front of me. And I had to like rub my eyes almost and go, is it Zoom? Is it a bad connection? You know, it wasn't pixelation or anything like that. It was just that they were changing so much in front of me because of what we were running there. And you never know when that's going to happen, but it does happen. I've had people where I didn't even take them in session. I just saw something going on in their life and I said, okay, let's look at this from an ethics perspective here, and showed them some information, gave them the data along with some policy for administration, because that's what ethics is it's personal administration, and said, go forth and apply, my son. And they said, you know, as soon as I got off of Zoom with you, my phone started ringing. People wanting my services. Literally, my phone started ringing as soon as I got off of Zoom with you. I've had people go in session and they couldn't get a job and they sent out 100 CVs. And then they said, immediately, I got more calls and more offers after that session. And I had the phone did not ring once, because you've opened up those flows. This is real. This is what happens. L11, the biggest problem with L11, and this is funny. The biggest problem with L11, and I've actually had to start warning people before I do it with them, is L11 has to do with doingness. And when you get the person through with L11, all they want to do is go out and play the game of life, because they are so unencumbered by all of these overts and withholds that have been holding them back, that all they want to do is go out and create and play, which is, you know, ultimately almost a liability from getting up the bridge, because they just want to go out and do their thing and do. And they're feeling so great that they're bulletproof, and they just go out and do. And they're so unbridled, which is amazing what you can do. The L's are tremendous for that sort of thing. And that's what you want to see. That's standard tech. So I've got stories for hours. There's that story I told in the podcast of the lady where we did pro-TRs for 3 days. And then a couple of months later, she almost knocks me over on the sidewalk on Cleveland Street in front of the Fort Harrison Hotel. And I didn't recognize her because I beat her up for 3 days unknowingly on TR0 bull bait about her weight. And she went through boxes of Kleenexes and all this. And the only reason I recognized her was because of her eyes. And she said, I wanted to thank you. You changed my life by telling
Wow.
me I was fat and that I had to sit there and confront the fact that I wasn't doing anything about it. And she lost over 100 pounds and she was elated, and I didn't even recognize her. She lost so much weight. That wasn't even auditing. That was just
Wow.
pro TRs. And that had to do with confront, and confront is auditing. And that's why TRs get case game.
Mm.
So, I mean, it just, the amazing things that you can see with training, the amazing things you can see with auditing, the amazing things you can see with putting policy in order into an area so that people can function properly and that flows can come into them. When we started doing the podcast, we'd done podcasts in the past, but when we started doing podcasts and we started answering these questions that people had and having podcasts on subjects that people wanted to hear, since then we've had more business than we can deal with because we've opened the flows. And like LRH says, it's a simple thing: outflow is holier than inflow. Outflow, 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 and you will receive flows in. That's how auditing works as well, but it's a third dynamic auditing by getting it out there, and it's going to come in from one area. It's not the area that you outflow to, but it's going to come in from other areas. This is why Coca-Cola spends hundreds of millions of dollars every year putting up pictures of Coca-Cola bottles, because outflow is holier than inflow. LRH didn't come up with this, but he observed it and he told us about it. Simple, simple, simple stuff. But it's that everybody says, there's common sense. Well, Scientology is not so common sense. You just have to avail yourself of it. That's pretty much what it comes down to. And it changes people's faces and their spaces and I mean, and on and on and on and on and on. Just amazing.
So this is interesting because it's like you're going into the subject that's talked about a lot with law of attraction and creating your reality and manifesting, but there doesn't seem to be anything that really even talks about that I've seen. It's just you're getting the clearing and your decisions just happen easier. It just seems to be the viewpoint. Is it different than that?
Yeah, what it comes down to is the book The Secret. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's just you're putting it in a different way. The only thing in Scientology that you're doing is you're stopping the being from being in their own way. Get them out of their own way, because you're the only thing stopping yourself. And you could tell somebody that and they could say, well, I can do that on my own. Okay, maybe you can. If good luck with that. And like Dr. Phil says, how's that working out for you? I mean, that's the thing is you either have the map or you don't. And LRH managed to come up with a map with workable things that get you to that destination. Because if you knew what was wrong with you, it wouldn't be wrong with you, and you wouldn't need Scientology or anybody else. And wait for it, you wouldn't be here on planet Earth, and you wouldn't be in the physical universe to begin with, and you wouldn't be listening to this podcast now, would you?
You mentioned why we all come to Earth as some kind of how did you term it?
Dumping ground.
Universal dumping ground. Okay.
Yep.
Can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, if you look at where Earth is in the Milky Way galaxy, it's on the outer rim. They mention this in Star Wars a lot too, the outer rim planets.
Right.
Well,
yeah.
we are an outer rim planet, and this is the Wild West as far as from a galactic viewpoint. And it is not the only universe either. I must point that out. It's not this. The physical universe is one of many universes. And these races, a lot of the races that we have come here, almost all of them, have faster than light travel, and they know how to fold space, for lack of a better word, and to use a Dune Frank Herbert concept. They know how to fold space and take a shortcut through that first universe on the left in order to go from their front lawn to planet Earth on the outer rim of the Milky Way galaxy. And they might jump from one galaxy, the Andromeda galaxy, or the other side of the physical universe, and get here in a matter of moments because they understand these concepts. And we live in a barbaric, dark ages society and universe, in the physical universe, where you have these unruly beings that will not abide by these other physical universe societies that see us as a problem. So what do? They say, okay, off to Rikers Island you go. And that's planet Earth. And they send you here. And then they keep you playing this game. And for lack of a better word, I'll use Sting from the Police's term, a soul cage. And they'll give you so many years that you can live, and you can do this: live, die, repeat, live, die, repeat, live, die, repeat. And so you're off playing that game, and they don't have to worry about you anymore, and you're no longer a problem for them because you're not stopping them from creating what they want to create. That's it. That's the simplest way I can put it. And this has been going on and is still going on to this very moment that we are doing this podcast. Period. I know this for a fact. And you can.
And so you were saying that there's reasons why we're here, whether we're some kind of criminal or
criminals, government protesters, perverts, tax evaders, artists, anything that didn't agree with the prevalent society within which you were in, whatever that society is. And there's an awful lot of people that have been here far, far longer than we have, who are far, far more degraded. And they are in very, very rough shape as beings. And this is what you handle on the upper OT levels that holds you back. That's all I'm going to say about that. Most of the people listening to this podcast are able enough to be the Thetan in charge of a body, and they are in less than awful shape, but it's all relative. And we've been sent here and put here and contained here for the purpose of getting us out of the way of somebody else's forward-looking project that we were impeding. That's the long and the short of it. And Scientology gets you to realize that. Somebody's. Yeah.
Okay.
and there's more and more every day. Like LRH says, the universe is littered with life. Life is everywhere. You can't keep a good life down. It's everywhere. Every planet has some form of life, no matter how cold, no matter how hot. I'm not going to say there's life on the sun. Obviously, that's, who knows? But he says truth is far more stranger than any fictionalized story you could ever create in this universe. And we are basically mushrooms being fed shit and kept in the dark, because if we were educated to what the true nature of this universe and other universes were, there is no way they could contain us. So what do? They lie to us. They lie to us. And Scientology gives you the answers to a lot of these lies to reveal them. And once you have that data, you can't keep a good Thetan down.
And one of those big lies is the meanings of words, I think you said, right?
Yeah, the meanings of words is our educational system, the omission of information. LRH says the hardest thing to spot is a missingness. These omissions, these alterations are all fraudulent points to keep us within a container of a reality that they want us to believe. And that is that man is from mud. You are an animal. You have a brain. Your brain is you. You are not a spiritual being. And that's how they begin to control you. And don't look behind the curtain to see the Wizard of Oz by any means. And that's why they stopped Scientology from progressing as an organization back in the late 70s.
Wow. Not just a threat to the psychiatric industry.
No, the psychiatric industry is just a control mechanism by a bunch of shitty ass beings that want to control people and suppress them, and they think that man is an animal. That's the long and the short of it. That's my opinion, and there are many, 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 many other people who are not Scientologists that see that is what is going on, because that's how you keep a good Thetan down, is you tell them that they're ADHD and this and that, and take this pill and it'll solve all your problems, and it just makes them worse, and then they go shoot up the local high school. Yeah, that's not working.
Yeah. So while you go up the bridge, not only are you clearing yourself, you're becoming more able, feeling better. How about abilities being released?
Well, those abilities are released meticulously by the grade chart in doing those things. Now, you may or may not, as a person getting auditing, you may get more gain than the other person because you might be higher toned, you have less in stimulation. That's not to say that you have less case. Not everybody has the same amount of case. Maybe your past life clear. Maybe you've been a really, really good being and you just happen to get picked up in a group grab for beings and you didn't belong here in the first place. You know, maybe Jesus Christ was one of those people. I could only begin to, hypothesize on that. But, he obviously, if in fact he did exist, he obviously was being there and communicating more than he probably should have, because they sure as heck didn't like him causing the good effects that he was causing.
So there are abilities that are released, um, like psychic abilities.
Oh gosh, yes. I mean, there are processes you can do that give you these abilities of being telepathic and things like that. LRH developed a process. When I was on staff, I worked with his original communicator, Andy Bagley, and LRH developed a process where you could read other people's minds. And he had to create a process to turn it back off because people were getting so upset about the things that they were thinking about other people. Which is totally real to me, because if a person has a reactive mind, they're going to say critical things about you. Oh, her calves are fat. She's got cankles. George, how could you? I thought you were my best friend, that sort of thing. And it was ARC breaking, causing upsets with people so much that he had to shut it off. I mean, the sky's the limit. There's all kinds of processes, early processes that can give you a lot of abilities. But what he found is that the case has to be set up for these things, for these abilities to stick and stay in, because otherwise it's fleeting and it doesn't last very long. So there's all kinds of abilities that can be gained. I mean, if you do the original OT levels that the church no longer does, some of those abilities, I'm going to say all of those abilities that he presents to you on the original OT levels, are nothing short of mind-blowing on the abilities that you can gain, to where one of the drills, I believe it's on original OT6, is you get in comm with somebody that hasn't communicated with you, and the drill is send them a message telepathically to get in communication with you, and they do. It does happen.
Wow.
Every time. It happened for me. It happens for everybody that I do it with. Because if you do it the way he says to do it, you can do it. And then basically the original OT levels, and probably why they were removed more than anything, is because they're positive gain levels, and you're getting a person to actually show that they have OT abilities and validate it so that they can go out and be OT. That's the last thing the powers that be want to have, is a bunch of OTs roaming around with abilities.
Right. Yeah.
I still haven't been able to uncover why the original OTs were mothballed. And I have nothing in writing to say that LRH is the one that decided that. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But the fact of the matter is that they show you OT abilities that he just says, basically, check this shit out. And you're like, what? and he says, yeah, just go ahead. And then you do it, and you're like, oh my fucking God, I can do this. And it's not just in your head. It is being done. You are doing these things, and you know unequivocally that you can do these things, and you can do it whenever you want to do them. And again, if you're an OT and you're doing bad things, you won't be OT for very long. But if you're an OT and you're doing good things, yeah, you can keep on having those abilities gained and use them for good. With great power comes great responsibility. That's what's important about abilities gained, is you can't have ability if you're doing it for the wrong reasons, because it's contra survival to the 8 dynamics, and the 8 dynamics will fold up on you, and you're no longer an OT. And the next thing you know, you're living on planet Earth in the outer rims of the Milky Way galaxy going, what the fuck happened? See my point?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Wow. I I I contacted my twin and I said, "Hey, I'm going on this podcast to ask this man some questions. He's class 8 OT8 and perhaps beyond." And so he mentioned how one of our teachers at the local center, she was saying how we want to find more people to be auditors because I want to have someone be able to audit me when I come back around this next life.
mhm.
And so he was wondering, why would you want to do it again if you've already done it? Do you collect more body thetans or engrams as you come through, or what's the purpose of that?
Well, LRH said it's no fun being dead. Dayton's got to have a game. And, this is my second time around. I was doing it last lifetime. I'm doing it this lifetime, and I'll be doing it next lifetime. I can't think of a better game. I've been around a really long time as a being and played lots of Star Wars and Star Trek games and lots of weird stuff to the right and to the left of that. And, it always ended the same way. And, it's the physical universe, and it's like an open world MMO video game. There's only so much you can do. And once you've done that stuff enough and you're aware of the fact that you've done all these different things and everything, you start looking at it and you go, well, I need to do something more for the greater good that I enjoy. And I enjoy helping people. And that's my thing. I enjoy it. I like being a musician like yourself. I like causing good effects. I like rhythm. I like being on that magic carpet ride with 4, 5, or 6 other guys, creating my own time. And that's what music is it's sort of an analogy to what you're doing as a Scientologist and as an auditor. Is you're creating a magic carpet ride for other people, and when you do that, you pull them along, they pull you along, and you create a new reality and stop getting stuck in these crazy ass games in the physical universe. How many more of those games do you have to play? How many times do you want to play Half-Life or Diablo or whatever? At some point, you've done every quest in the game. Then what? Well, it's time to create a new game and get the hell out of this universe and create something different. That's my drive on it. And I can't think of any other better endeavor than to do this. Now, does that mean that I don't like to play drums? No. Does it mean that I don't have other interests? No. But I do understand the universe and that there are other universes, and I know that I can go from one side of this universe to the other, and I can go to other universes, and there are other beings there that are significantly different than we are and have different viewpoints. And to me, that's the coolest thing ever. And LRH gave me the ability to do that. And I can help somebody who's dying and prevent them from dying for a few hours to a few days to whatever, and put them in touch with people that they would no longer ever have anything to do with anymore, and repair relationships and build affinity back so that they can say their last goodbyes. And to me, there isn't any other greater purpose. None. Sorry, I get a little misty about that, but
Yeah.
I appreciate that he's given me that ability.
Wow. Amazing.
And so for all of our listeners and Michael, we appreciate you being here, and we will see you on the next podcast on Monday or Tuesday. And namaste, and we love you. Bye for now.